All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Rick Perlstein. Rick is a writer, a historian, and a New York Times best-selling author of several books, including Nixonland and The Invisible Bridge, all of which and more you can find at rickperlstein.net. You can also find him on Twitter at Rick Perlstein. Rick, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Matt, it's always a pleasure. How long have we been doing this?
Probably close to 5 years or so, I would guess, or maybe 4. But it's been a while, brother.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, so let's start out here with kind of the idea of Republican and GOP extremism. So pretty much every day, most people probably know Donald Trump, he's saying something horrible, right? He's saying something racist, Islamophobic. Most recently, this week, he called for the ban of all Muslims entering the United States.
This one's going to finish him.
You think so? Well, so my first question, the rhetoric seems worse. Let's start from a historical context. Is the rhetoric of Republicans right now worse, or is it sort of the same, just in a different way?
You know, that's why I asked you how long we've been doing this. It feels like every time we do an interview, we could kind of take the previous interview and just kind of like dial it up to 11 as far as like intensity and scariness, right? I mean, it's just like we just like torqued a little bit more. I think anyone who reads my books knows that extremist rhetoric on the right is just written into the DNA. I mean, my favorite crazy example from Before the Storm was the group of Goldwater activists in Arizona who insisted that there was a plan by the communists to blow up all 50 state capitals at the same time on a certain signal, right?
Right.
But I think the difference in the history we're talking about is that kind of rhetoric floats higher and higher up the food chain of the Republican establishment, such that, by 2015, we're at a watershed where the obvious frontrunner in the Republican nomination fight, and don't listen to what you say, he's not going to fade away, the people aren't going to come to their senses, the establishment is not going to come in, he is approaching the point of being a lock for the nomination. So we have this guy who's the figurehead for the party, basically sounding like a Nazi. And, here we are. It's a long time coming, but this is the apotheosis.
So we'll move on here. But so one of the things I do want to ask, though, is because, a lot of people, not myself, but I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's no way Trump can win. Oh, no, they're going to come to their senses. Like all the stuff you were just saying.
There's no way Goldwater can win the nomination either.
Right. Well, so I guess let's go historically, because I know you've recently written, a couple months ago, you wrote about kind of comparing Reagan to Trump and how nobody thought Reagan could win either, and just sort of the kind of comparing Reagan as the host of a TV show to Trump hosting his own TV show. So let's talk a little bit give us a little historical context of how no one thought Reagan could win, and obviously we all know that he did.
Right. That particular piece, like a lot of my work, really took on as its subject the kind of establishment political pundits.
Right.
And what I pointed out was a lot of these guys don't even seem to be aware that Donald Trump was on a hit TV show, for over 10 years.
Yeah.
So, even when its ratings were the worst, before they revivified it with the Celebrity Apprentice, it was being watched by 10 million people a week, which is many, 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 many more times the number of people that watch, the most highly rated cable news show or the Sunday news show. So this guy, entered into people's homes using the finest opposite of the finest arts of Hollywood wizardry as a certain kind of character. The omnicompetent guy who even the most powerful and competent people defer to in all things. And that was The Apprentice. That was Donald Trump. He's this kind of terrestrial god. And I drew the comparison to Ronald Reagan, who, as we know, was pretty much a failed Hollywood actor when it came to movies. by the middle of the 1950s, he was, reduced to doing this Las Vegas review that was absolutely, terrible. And even his agent said had laid an egg. But then he got, of course, this job with General Electric. And he became a very successful television star. General Electric Theater was constantly atop the ratings. It did better than Ed Sullivan. It did better than basically all the shows on Sunday nights. And he was on it until 1961. And then after it went off the air, he was on another syndicated show, Death Valley Days, and he played a role too. The role he played was the avuncular host who kind of supervised or superintended all these stories that always ended with a happy ending. So by the time he ran for governor, which was basically right around the time he stopped being on Death Valley Days, the public knew who he was. They thought he was the guy they saw on TV. And, of course, no one saw his success coming. I love to quote again and again the pundits in 1965 and 1966 who, said that he had about as much chance of becoming governor of California as, Lassie, the star of the, dog show on TV. And another piece that I ran in Vice, did you see that one, Matt?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I took the tendency to dismiss demagogues as harmless clowns all the way back to the Big Kahuna, all the way back to Hitler.
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator hilariously sent up Hitler as a joke. There's a famous scene in which he was parodied in Austin Powers, in which Hitler,
he's dancing around with the balloon of the globe and all that stuff that you showed. Yeah.
Right, and then it pops and starts crying.
Yeah.
And Charlie Chaplin very much regretted making that movie because he thought it made Hitler seem like someone who was not serious, someone you didn't need to worry about. And in fact, he made the movie almost at the behest of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So, it's a very dangerous thing to dismiss people as a joke. I don't think people are doing it anymore with Trump, but that was a very long, slow process. And we still see people just absolutely expending the most furious intellectual energy to try and dismiss his importance. Nate Silver, who I think is kind of be shitting himself with his silliness these days, claims that no one is paying attention yet, to the primary race. So none of these polls mean anything. Well, what Nate doesn't notice apparently is that every time the Republican Party puts on a primary debate, they get about 3 times more viewers than any record primary debate in any election in the past.
Yeah.
So clearly people are paying attention. They're even paying attention, believe it or not, to the Democrats, which also received higher ratings than the previous record primary debates. One of the themes I've been pursuing in my work, and I'm with the Washington Spectator now, WashingtonSpectator.org. Is it org? Is it net? Is it com? You can Google Washington Spectator. Is that with Trump, all bets are off because of Citizens United, because of the way money works, because of the maturation of the infrastructure of right-wing reaction, because of the press's insistence on playing the both sides do it card, even as Donald Trump is calling for things like, registering Muslims and not letting them in the country. The previous variables by which we measure the success of a presidential candidate or the vulnerability of a presidential candidate hold as they have in the past. But people are still telling the same stories and analyzing things in exactly the same way.